Hello and welcome to Sound Like, where today we're going to be having a look at Darkshines. Personally, this is my favourite song off Origin of Symmetry and one of my all-time favourite Muse songs, so I thought with my recent cover, I'd teach you how to sound like Darkshines, or at least how I sound like Darkshines. The guitar I'm going to be using to demonstrate all of the sounds you're going to see in this video today are going to be from my Fender Telecaster with an MBK1 in the bridge. But before we get into it, don't forget to like, share and subscribe and hit the bell to make sure you don't miss out on any of my content. And now with that out of the way, let's get into Darkshines. So to kick things off, we're going to be having a look at the intro of the song. Now my patch for this is really very simple. It's my overdrive distortion with some delay. Now the overdrive distortion pedal kind of really at the moment is sitting mostly towards the distortion side of things, but because of the nature of this song, I kind of like to kind of fly between mostly overdrive or mostly distortion. It's really up to you how you want to do it, partly because this is a very brief sound that we hear. I never use this patch again in this particular way, so I kind of like to see it as kind of very open to interpretation. In terms of the delay, once again, you can kind of play around with the levels that you want to go with here if you want to have a specific setting. At the moment, the level of the repeats is actually quite high, so there's quite a lot of build up there, but you can bring it down to make it a bit more subtle and ambient if you ramp up the feedback. So really, it's open to interpretation about how you want to approach with it, but with the settings I've got, this is what the intro sounds like. The level of ambience for this is completely up to you. My approach for this is usually to have quite a lot of feedback with the delay repeats quite low, but for this demonstration I'm kind of taking it in another direction, partly because the song is quite open to interpretation of how you want those ambiences to work, and I do like to experiment. With the settings I have for this at the moment, the repeats are quite loud with the feedback being quite low. So that's it for the intro. Now let's move on to the verse. So with the intro out of the way, let's move on to the verse. Now the settings I'm using here account for every time the verse appears. There's no difference in settings as we move on with the song. In terms of the setup, it is my blues pedal with my delay. Again, still tapped into the same tempo as the song and the same settings as I was using before. Now counterintuitively, the settings for the delay for this part of the song in the verse are quite different from the intro. Ideally, I would like to have more feedback and less delay repeats from the delay itself. Now this means if you're stuck with one delay, you have to find settings that work for everything that you've got, or unless you really want to double down on one sound but then sacrificing your ideal sound in other places. It's entirely up to you, your approach for this, but because of the nature of this song, you have this kind of like spooky vibe. You do quite want to go for something that's got quite a lot of ambience in there to really kind of fill it out. So when you come to the chorus, that change up in sound, that dynamic shift is so much more powerful because you're stripping out that big ambience from the delay to a straight distorted sound. In terms of my drive for this part of the song, I'm using my MXR Timmy Overdrive with the gain rolled off quite a lot down to about 10 o'clock. Up to about 12 o'clock for this pedal, it really is just a clean boost, and around 10 o'clock is where I really want to have maybe a slight bit of bite, but mostly just more of a boost that kind of evens out the tone there. For me, it works perfectly to try and get some sort of sound that works really well to complement the actual song of Darkshines itself, and coupled with the delay, it sounds like this. Now the way I hear it, this part of the song obviously wants a restrained type of sound. You don't want anything that's going to be quite bited and crunchy. You want something that's quite subtle and muted, maybe with a bit of flair, but nothing to try and distract. The guitar itself isn't really following the rhythm, it is doing its own thing, but it is not really the standout instrument here. So you want something that's not necessarily going to stand out on its own originally, but with the way that you approach with this, it can present itself quite well and sit fantastically well in the mix if you get it right. The settings that I've shown you here are my suggestion. Now to come away from those big ambiences, we're going to be moving over to the chorus, so we're going to be doing away with the delay and subtle bite with something that's a bit more punchy and in your face. Now the drives I'm using here are my Big Muff and my Overdrive Distortion. The Overdrive Distortion obviously using the same settings as it was before, again open to interpretation if you want to have it a bit more overdriven or a bit more distorted if you have that ability, and the Big Muff is doing what Big Muffs do best and blowing your head off. Because of the functionality of my Boss ES8, I'm able to put one drive on one channel and another drive on the other. With a big strong chorus like Darkshines, a strong stereo sound for your rhythm section is ideal if possible. So if you have the ability to have a stereo sound, then go for it. If you are limited to a mono board, then just find something that works for you that sounds approximately in the middle of that. I know that with an overdrive pedal and my Big Muff, that's two quite different sounds, but I would argue that straight down the middle, a good solid distortion sound would do just as well in a pinch. In terms of the performance on the guitar, you want to make sure you're being as powerful as you can whilst retaining a lot of accuracy and muting the strings where possible. With all that combined, it should sound something like this. Now this chorus sound that I've shown you works for every time the chorus appears in this song, so with all that covered, let's move on to the solos. So moving on to the solos for Darkshines, my signal chain here is my whammy pedal, splitting into one channel my prime distortion and on the other my Big Muff, coming together at the end to again go into my delay. One particular thing to mention with this setup is that it's very much a stereo setup, very different from what I would say is the original solo for Darkshines. Maybe with the recent remix there's a bit more balancing going on there, a bit more of an interesting experiment into combining sounds with a whammy and then a dry sound. The setup itself with the two channels, with the two distortions, create a nice balanced stereo field in itself and then being recombined into the delay. Recently I've been experimenting with my delay into an actual proper stereo kind of delay spread, which kind of widens that stereo field, as for a lack of a better phrase, even more to my ear. So with all that in mind, this is what the solo sound sounds like. Obviously, another thing to mention here is that with the delay level repeats here, it's quite high. It's maybe quite overpowering, but I kind of like that for Darkshines with the kind of bombasticness of the big chorus. I like to have a sound that's just as kind of over the top, and maybe having too much of a higher delay repeats can maybe achieve that. It's up to you if you want to go for that. If you want to go with the other delay approach with more feedback but less delay time repeats that you can hear, it might work better for you. But because of the nature of the song, it's quite a little bit open to interpretation. I would say you can experiment with what you've got, and this is just one way that you can go with it, and this is the way that I'm going with it for this moment in time. Darkshines is a song that I like to play around with my settings for quite a bit, but the ones that I'm showing you here are ones that I often go for quite a lot. So moving on from the main whammy solos is the kind of break solo just before the final chorus. Now my approach for this is really, really simple. It's my Big Muff going into my delay. There's no fancy splitting drives and signals into each other. It's just my Big Muff with my delay. With my recent experimentation into trying to get a stereo sound from my delay, that's all I'm really going for there. That's getting the sound that I really want to have. Again, going back to how I may want to tune the delay differently with more feedback and less level, that's another way that you might want to approach for this particular sound. The last thing to note for this part of the song is actually I'm using my volume pedal here and ramping a lot of that sound down. Also, I'm pulling a lot of gain off from the guitar as well. That combination of removing a lot of that gain removes a lot of that harshness from the initial sound that you get from the guitar, but it also does help to retain a lot of that warmth as well after the actual initial attack. Switching over to the neck pickup helps to get that warmer sound even more, and then relying on the delay to kind of create the ambience from the sound as well goes perfectly well to create a good sound that works with this part of Darkshines. And with all that in mind, this is what it sounds like. So coming away from all of the solos and the last chorus now done, we now look at the very last bit of the song, which is just the outro, which is effectively just one strike of a D minor chord with some overdrive distortion and some delay. The cleverer ones among you will recognise that's actually my intro sound. I'm just using it again where I said in the intro that this is the only time the sound appears. My approach for this part of the song is in two minds. I could just stay on the chorus channel and just let the chord run out, or use the channel with some delay to really thicken out and have some ambience. It's really just how I feel in the moment, and to have multiple options is never a bad thing. It's really good to just be able to just flick on that one sound quite easily and go, yeah, this is a good way to end the song. Because it is just one strike on a chord, completely up to you how you want to do it. I enjoy doing it, and with my setup, this is what it sounds like. So there we have it. That was Sound Like Darkshines in its entirety. I do hope you enjoyed this one as always. This is a particularly exciting one for me to put together because Darkshines is one of my all-time favourite Muse songs. I personally absolutely love my Telecaster sound. It sounds fantastic, and in some ways it sounds superior to both of my Mansons, kind of busting that myth that you need or must have a Manson in order to play a Muse cover well, or play a Muse cover at all. It's a good way to just remind you that a guitar is a guitar, and it's entirely up to the guitarist ability to really get a good sound out of it. If you liked the sounds that I've demonstrated in this video, you can click here to watch my cover of Darkshines to see all those sounds in action. And until next time, I've been Harry, and thanks for watching.